Hey, welcome to the City Rev Life podcast. My name is Robey. I'm a pastor. This is my buddy Muche, and I don't think he is a pastor. He's already laughing at me.
No, it's because we're actual friends. Because I love you. Because we're friends.
I'm doubting that right now, Muche.
No doubt.
Anyway,
No doubt.
Pastor Muche is one of my favorite humans, and about 10 minutes ago, I learned yet another reason.
Are you really going to do this?
I told you I was going to, and I'm still going to do it. Yet another reason why I love Pastor Muche. He has a rap career.
Career is a very interesting word. I have a rap history. I don't know if I would use the word.
I didn't know this. All the years I've known Muche, he's never let that out. So you said you were featured on an album? Like, who are we talking about?
Yeah, it's irrelevant.
Who?
I was featured on my wife's album.
Well, okay, his wife would sing. That's legit. But okay, what else? Was it like how many songs are we talking?
There's a couple songs out there. I did a feature on Show Baraka stuff.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Is it on one of his albums on Spotify?
Yeah. Praise God for mechanical and royalties.
It says featuring Muche Ukegbu.
It does say that. Yep.
So immediately
drink my coffee.
Drop what you're doing. Stop listening to this podcast. Go to Spotify, look up Show Baraka, and look for featuring Muche Ukegbu. Listen to that, and then come back and enjoy the rest of this podcast. Yet another reason why we here at City Rev love Muche Ukegbu. And I'm glad that you're here. You've been in South Florida how many years now?
Dog years or human years? Because South Florida is
church planter
years. 5 years, man.
Which is even more. Church planter years is even more than dog years. So that's like 50 in like that's like 50 church planter years is 5. So anyway, one of the things I love about Muche is you love this city, so we love this guy. He's committed to the gospel, committed to the city, and I've been looking forward to this podcast episode for several weeks. I wanted to hear from you, Muche, just as far as we're going through this pandemic, we're going through this quarantine, Corona, all of this stuff, and processing. How are you processing it? How's your church processing it? What's God putting on your heart? And so we're going to talk about God's grace. You can see God's grace in our lives through this. So talk a little bit about what got you to that place where you were kind of thinking through seeing it, because I think most of us are seeing it like, oh God, why are you doing this? Why are we being afflicted? But man, that's a change of perspective to see how is this God's grace.
Yeah. Before I say anything on that, I do want to just affirm who you are as a friend and a leader in this city and beyond. And man, thank you for having me.
Oh man, thank you.
And if you went to go listen to a song, please don't hold it against me. So,
thank you.
Grace. I feel like in this moment, grace almost feels like a dirty word. It's like, grace, no, things are closed, life is hard. But honestly, grace was the first thing that came to my mind when everything started happening. And primarily because grace is God's unmerited favor, his divine power on our behalf for our good, which means it doesn't stop with things. It actually shows up when things are the worst. And so I was like, all right, God, where can grace be found in this moment? And honestly, I think the thing that has really just been shaping me, my family, our church, my conversations has been the power of vulnerability and how God, through his grace, has made us all more vulnerable. And vulnerability, it empties the heart of pride. It empties the heart of this illusion of control. And in the last month and a half, we've had a shared human experience where all of us have been brought to our knees. And to me, that's grace, because we're not in control. We are not very good at being God. And in this moment, God has exposed that, at least in my heart. So even there's that whole Niebuhr quote, man is mortal, that is his fate. Man pretends not to be mortal, that is his sin. Man is a creature whose perspectives and experience is shaped by time and space, but he touches the fringes of the eternal. And as he touches the eternal, he realizes how eternal the eternal is and how finite the finite is. And it just feels like in this moment, we're just being confronted with our humanity and the reality that we aren't God, you know? And that confrontation of humanity is an exposure of vulnerability, which is honestly to me is an experience of grace. So that's how the grace in this moment is the increase in vulnerability. Yeah, I think.
You know, we never think about, man, I appreciate that. We never think about vulnerability as a gift. You know, we never think about vulnerability as something that as a benefit to us.
Yeah.
But, you know, that Niebuhr quote, man, that is so powerful. The idea that reminding us that we are not God.
Yes.
Humbling us. I mean, that kind of like pride like that, that's not just like a, hey, you know, people are bothered. Maybe you should get the pride out of your life because people are bothered by that. It's not nice. Pride is fundamentally is damaging us, and it's undoing, you know, the way we're wired is to be humbled before and awestruck before God. Pride works diametrically opposed to that, right?
You preaching. Yes.
Yeah. So the vulnerability and taking the pride out is a gift to us.
Yeah, and so vulnerability to me is like getting socks for Christmas. You know, like it's like you don't say, you know what I want for Christmas this year? Socks. And like, you know, and it's one of those things where even socks now are more fashionable.
Yeah.
But you still don't want them. Like, no, Christmas.
I've gotten some really nice socks, for the record.
No, praise God. Who got them for you?
I mean, I've had friends.
They're not. You want to call them that? Is that? What
They
you're gonna
were
call
nice socks. They're really
Okay,
nice.
Amen. The people who got me socks were my parents. All right, but praise God. But no, it's one of those things where like you don't go out looking for it. That would be weird. But you know you need it. You're going to have a wedding. You're gonna have an interview. You're gonna have some moment where you need it. And I think vulnerability is that. It is a gift. It's just a gift we don't want or go looking for. But when we get it, to me, it would make sense to take advantage of it. And so in a moment like this, I think one of the ways we take advantage of this gift is by allowing the Lord to do work on our hearts.
Yeah.
I feel like one of the things I've seen in my own life, but then also in South Florida, is it's very easy to hide in this city. You know, like you could create a picture of who you want to be and then live out of that narrative, even if it's not accurate, and that just hide. But it's just a lot harder to hide in this moment. And honestly, I think that's one of the ways we actually receive this gift well is by not hiding and by letting the Lord do work in the exposure.
So
Sorry.
Let's go with that for a second. No, that's great. So we feel vulnerable.
Yep.
That is a gift.
It is.
And one of the things in this season you're saying that we do to try and avoid vulnerability is and avoid this gift, which will humble us and reset us in our right spot before God, is we hide.
Yes.
Now, I would think initially that you're saying in the seasons it's harder to hide.
Oh, for sure.
But I would think in this season maybe our reflex would be say, well, actually, Pastor Muche, I'm stuck at home. I'm not around any humans. You know, like I feel like I'm already perpetually in hiding.
Yeah, it may seem easier to hide from people, but it's more difficult to hide from God. Here's what I mean. One of the ways I feel like we hide from God is by living pessimistically. So we actually don't expect anything from him. We don't go to him for anything. We just kind of keep him as that distant relative or that detached landlord that has no real bearing on our everyday experience. And when you are in your house, and it is you, even if you have kids, and virtual school is what it is, amen. You know, but like when it's your house and it's the mundane, it really shows how you interact with God. Is he there? Is he considered? Are you conscious of him? Or are you just carrying on? And what I've seen and heard in conversations is a lot of what I would say just the carrying on is because of pessimism, this fear of believing God for anything. And how can I believe God for anything in a moment so scary as this? Yeah.
So I think that's true. I think, I know I've heard people say, if you had, any issues in your marriage, well, quarantine's going to bring those to the surface, right? That's a fact. If you had brokenness with your kids, if there's a behavior that was happening with your kids, that's right there, and it's going to be dealt with because you're in quarantine. So in a sense, what you're saying is, when it comes to it's similar with God, and even maybe more potent with God, we tend to use relationships, use going to work, maybe even physically going to church. We use those things actually as a way to hide
escapist behaviors.
Yeah,
because the escape isn't the activity; it's the heart behind the activity. It's not necessarily what I'm doing; it's the motivation. Why am I doing it? What am I avoiding in doing it? And it is very hard to walk with the Lord. Like, that's hard. Like, that's not a natural thing to have relationship with God when physically you're not staring at him in the face, like I am. So it's very difficult. And so we tend to avoid the difficulties of that relationship with activity, as opposed to the things that honestly become the heartbeat of that relationship, intimacy, prayer, conversations with other people about, and we just, those are what's in front of you, not the ease of certain activities. So lest I ramble or cut you off. Yeah.
So in this season, we can't hide from God. So we've got to deal with the fact that, so let me just back up.
Can't hide well.
You can't hide well. So we can go about our life, not really be conscious of God, not really going to God for things, not going to him as a provider, not going to him as our source of wisdom, sustaining us. We can just do our thing, and then, if we need something, or we're feeling spiritual, engage God. But in this season, there's so many that we can't hide. We got questions, we've got issues, and because we're feeling vulnerable, and now that's making us, square up to God. So we can't hide from God. But also, there's another layer here, and this season's making us not be able to hide from God as well. But then there's another thing you're talking about here is there is just not as much stuff to do.
Yes.
It's like if you played basketball, up until recently, you couldn't go to the park. But even when you can go to the park, I've heard you have to all have your own basketball, and there'll only be a certain number of people and all this stuff. All these things we can't go do to escape some things we need to address with God.
Yeah.
And a lot of those things I think are, I think one of the challenging parts of that is, for a Christian, there's a lot of activities that sound godly, but they're not actually making me engage God. Like, how many, as a pastor, how many pastors or people who lead or serve in the church, their ministry is actually distracting them from just time with God.
Yeah.
Right?
Brother, you speaking to my soul. Yeah. And I think it's easier to be distracted. And I think that should make us uncomfortable. And the distractions come in so many different forms. But one of the things that's just been challenging me is how creative I am, and how my creativity is really seen and distracted myself. Yeah. I get extremely creative when it comes to doing things that I really want to do, and the things that I really want to do at times really just don't have nothing to do with God at all. And it's not that they're necessarily bad things per se. They're just I just don't even think about them. And but the quote unquote normal distractions aren't there anymore. So why am I still not engaging? And then it goes back to, well, I got to deal with what am I trying to avoid? Because that goes back to hiding. Hiding is I'm avoiding something. And honestly, I think the core that we're trying to avoid is, does God exist and does God care? And not in a general, does God care, but does God care about me personally? And when I have to start to wrestle with some of those dynamics, man, that's a frightening thing, you know? Because then you have to look back at history, you have to go to the Word, you have to go to these moments, and it's just a lot easier to not have to deal with that, quite honestly. But I feel like part of the grace in this moment is God is saying it's easy to not deal with that, but in this moment, I'm gonna make it difficult. So let's deal. Let's do work, you know?
So someone listening or watching, they might say, well, look, Pastor Muche, I mean, I was tracking with you for a bit, but it's not like I don't believe that God exists. I believe God exists. Pastor Muche, I know that God cares. I mean, I can quote you a verse, you know, the Lord is my shepherd. You know, so what would you say? Go a little bit, how would you respond to that? The believer listening that might be like, well, I know God exists and he cares. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, like the best way I think I could respond to that is with an illustration.
Okay.
And, you know, let's see if this illustration works.
I mean, the sock one worked, so we're
did
on
the sock
a roll.
one work? Oh, man, 1 for 1. That's called pressure. And so, like, I'm trying to buy a house in the heart of Miami close to our church building. In my current house, we have a mango tree that sits in our front yard. Yeah. And we have a coconut tree in our backyard. That's part of the reason why we rented it. Now, I'm convinced that if you go to the store to get mangoes, it's because you don't have friends in Miami. That's because everybody has a mango
I was actually thinking, I've been distracted since you said you had a mango tree.
See?
Because you've never offered me any mangoes, bro. What the heck?
Because I assumed that you had other people giving you mangoes.
Well, what kind of friend would make that assumption? Like,
You're shaming me. I feel bad.
We'll deal with this later, Muche.
We'll deal
anyway,
with
you have a mango tree.
I do have a mango tree. And so anyway, as I've been afforded more time, I'm moonlighting as a horticulturalist. And so like I'm just learning all this random stuff. And as we're looking for houses, you know, I'm like, man, not all these houses have mango trees. So it would be a sacrifice. And so I was like, you know what? What if, you know, I took a mango seed and I planted it in a future house. And I was like, how long would that take? And it was like, man, it could take like 6 years. I was like, that's crazy. I was like, there has
6 years to get for it to bear another mango.
To bear another. Ooh. I was like, that's madness. My ADD and impulsivity was like, there has to be another way. And so I was like, okay, if I don't want to take this seed, plant it in the ground, could I just cut the tree and then replant it?
Okay, like, you can buy mango trees, Muche.
So I'm a pastor. So I don't know, like, so there's that.
Are they expensive? I don't know.
Yeah.
They are expensive?
They're expensive when you're trying to buy a house. So this part is like, do I want to?
Right.
You know, amen. So
maybe if you'd given me mangoes in the past, I'd,
if you're listening to this mango tree podcast, you know what to do. Find me.
Buy Muche.
Find me.
That's why you agreed to come on this.
That is why I agreed. Everything is done for a reason.
What's this mango tree?
But
right,
anyway, continue.
Could you cut down the tree?
You could cut down this tree, or cut it, like graft it. This is like Romans, right? You could graft it, and then you could just put it in the ground, and it won't take the 6 years. It'll take a little bit shorter. I think it's like 3 years, maybe 1 to 3.
It'll like get roots.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right.
And I thought to myself, man, that's how we treat the spiritual life. We surround ourselves with activity. We surround ourselves with an environment that we think produces fruit, but it's not actually planting seeds into our heart. And so when I to respond to what you said earlier, before we went on the elaborate illustration, I think it's really in these moments that you see if you've planted deep seeds. Like if you've actually had the difficulty life brings to the relationship with God that forces a level of intimacy and wrestling. But honestly, it's just a lot easier to just chop down spiritual vitality and then plug it in and then assume that roots are there, assume roots go deeper.
Wow.
And I actually think that's most people's faith, not in a overgeneralized, because I'm not a pessimist by nature, but I just think we don't really do that work because life often doesn't afford us the opportunity to do that hard work, which is to sit, to wrestle, to process. We're just on the move. We're always on the go. And so I wouldn't question somebody's belief or anything like that in that way. But I would say asking good questions in this season, wrestling with the Word of God, wrestling with other people will reveal if those roots are deeper than just surface level regurgitation of truth, which we're all capable of.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's 2 for 2, but
2 for 2.
my identity is secure in
2
Jesus.
for 2, and you
so
might get a mango tree out
I'm
of this.
good.
So.
If I could get a mango tree out of this, it's the
Someone
only
out
time I'm
there-
staring into the camera.
So, someone out there, if you have a connection to get this man a mango tree, I mean, I think he's ministering to your soul. And anyway, all right. So, all right. We've talked about how vulnerability is a grace from
Yep.
God. It is, in this season, we can't hide from God with a lot of activities and escapist behaviors. And it's exposing, our roots because we're being shaken, and it is exposing whether we're sturdy. I think about actually the Psalm 112 in our series, The Power of Awe. We're looking at Psalm 112.
Oh, that's such a good series.
What's that?
That's such a good series.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate it. The Power of Awe. Anyway, Psalm 112. It says the man who is awestruck by God, basically, it says he does not fear bad news. It says his heart is firm, his heart is steady, and that's kind of what I'm hearing from you.
Man.
It's like in this season.
Way to clean that up. Yeah.
Yeah. This season, I had to bring some kind of coherence to what you're saying.
You did, because it was everywhere.
No. What I'm hearing from you saying is it's exposing our roots. It exposes good questions we need to wrestle with God. And, it's kind of a domino effect. He's saying, hey, let's deal with this. And we would be like, no, I'm going to go play racquetball. Well, I can't play racquetball, well, I'm going to go somewhere. Well, I can't hide. I can't escape. I can't hide. I got to deal with this. So in that sense, the vulnerability brings, and this season brings a grace.
Yeah.
What else? What other ways is this bringing this season this vulnerability or this season bringing a grace into our lives?
Yeah, I think honestly, so I've been reading this book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. Mm-hmm. It has been revolutionizing my soul, brother. I mean, the speed at which we live at, it's almost like busyness and hurry is a badge of honor, like to have a pace that's quick. I mean, I ran track, so speed is my thing, right? Mm-hmm. But to be able to say, man, I don't have any time this week, but I could get with you like in a week or 2 weeks, and that the illusion of importance that brings, and so just the nature of busyness. I've honestly discovered through reading this book and through this moment, it's not tied to scheduling, it's tied to my soul. It's the stuff beneath the scheduling. It's what's motivating me, what's shaping my decision making. Because even in a moment like this, it feels like you could still be busy. I'm like, how is it I can't go anywhere, but I'm still busy? Like, how does that work? And then it's like, because I feel like if I don't, people will see me some type of way, or God can't. And so it feels like one of the graces that, like, honestly, I've been experiencing is like God hitting like a holy reset on my life and saying, okay, you have more margin. If you're busy, why? And what are the things that you really need to build rhythm around? And for me, it's been good. It's been hard. A lot of hard conversations with some of our pastors, our team, my wife. But it's been good. It's been good because what I know is nobody's going to the next phase the same way that they went into COVID, right?
Yeah.
Like there's just everybody's going to be different. But just because everybody's going to be different doesn't mean we're all going to be better, And so like for several reasons, some more pragmatic than others,
right?
Because of the nature of this disease. But yeah, it's like, man, God, I don't want to go into what comes next like tired or with a life that is busy and full, no margin. And that's honestly been the challenge I've been having with some of our people too. It's that whole Luke 10, Martha versus Mary dynamic where, man, like he just looks at Mary, he says she's chosen a better portion. And all she did was sit at his feet. She just sat at his feet and she enjoyed the fact that Jesus was who he says he was.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's not to become monastic, right? Or quasi Amish, but it is to recover.
Yeah.
Wait a second. Like Jesus isn't subject matter. He's a person.
Oh, that's good.
You know what I mean? Like it's not like Jesus isn't a collection of ideas that I encounter through communication. Like he's a person that I engage with, I commune with. And that's just been, busyness erodes my ability to see Jesus as beautiful. And so one of the graces that I feel like God's given all of us, but we got to leverage it, is margin and a reset on how we think we should work.
That's so true about busyness, man. I mean, we are busy. It's like a badge of honor, like the busier we are, it must mean we're more important or we're more productive. I mean, we can be a lot busy and not productive, but it makes us feel better about ourselves. And it's just, boy, he just sticks it to Martha, doesn't he?
Man, the way he comes, and what's sad and honestly a little bit scary is she wasn't doing bad stuff.
Yeah.
Like, in fact, earlier in Luke, because that's Luke 10, so earlier in Luke, like Jesus is going to be invited into a Pharisee's house, and the Pharisee is going to judge Jesus because this woman comes in, this unseemly woman who had a past, and she's just washing Jesus's feet because she knows who he is and she knows who she is. And the Pharisee, he's like, yo, like, if he was really a prophet, he would know, like, who's washing his feet, blah, blah, blah. And Jesus looks this man in the face and he says, I've been in your house. You haven't washed my feet. You haven't brought me any water. Yeah. You've done none of that stuff. And he rebukes this man for not doing things that he should have done. Yeah. You get to Luke 10, Martha's doing all of that activity. It's not bad activity. It's good activity. It's like, yo, Jesus is in the house. We need to go get the food ready. Yo, we need to wash his feet. But Jesus is saying, he says to her, he says, look, you are troubled and anxious about many things. And he is cutting to the heart like, yo, Martha, you're worried that if you don't do this, you'll look some type of way.
Yeah.
And additionally, she's not just worried about how she's going to look. It's affecting her relationship. So she says, Jesus, yo, Jesus, I'm preaching. She says, Jesus, tell my sister to help me. Yeah. And so now it's affecting the way she's relating to Mary. Right. Busyness is a monster. And Jesus slays monsters because he's God. He looks her in the eyes with tenderness and love. And he's like, yo, you're troubled. It's not worth it. Mary's chosen a better portion. You should do that. But
you imagine, he said a gentleness with gentleness and love and grace, but he's basically saying,
he's better.
A little bit. But he said to Martha, your sister, she's right and you're wrong. Like that's pretty hard to hear. And it's pretty hard to hear when you're complaining about your sister. Hey, time out. Quit complaining about your sister. She's right and you're wrong.
There's a word in there. You're going to have to rewind so you can get the word that he just said. Boy, that's why you my pastor. That's why you my pastor, brother.
It's like, I have you on here, Muche. First of all, to chastise you for not sharing your mangoes. But second of all, so I can get this kind of encouragement. Thank you. But I feel like we're talking on this episode, but I feel like we could be talking to pastors more than any other group because what we do is we serve Jesus all the time. We write sermons and we care for like the flock. And the bottom line for pastors is if we don't differentiate what Martha's doing, setting up the house for Jesus versus sitting at his feet.
Come on.
Right? And so, hey, an encouragement to you. We are pretty much doing group therapy for each other right now.
That's what it feels like. It feels like group therapy for my soul.
We're doing group therapy for us. But one of the things I think you're saying about this season is when we're eliminating busyness, and he's saying you can't hide, you can't escape, you can't be busy. You have to listen and sit in the vulnerabilities. And I think these are all things that are a grace to us. So, hey, we're wrapping up this episode, but any final thoughts, Muche, just how is this a grace to us in this season?
Yeah, I think Acts 17 is a powerful passage in the scripture. It's Paul arguing on Mars Hill, right? Dueling all of these competing ideologies, gods, what have you. And in his argument, he makes this statement. He says, God has established the boundaries of your habitats, right? Whoa. When you were born, where you were born, all established by God, which in and of itself is wow. But then he gives the reason that you would seek him.
Wow.
And in seeking him, realize that he's not far off. Mm-hmm. And so we were born into this COVID moment by grace, that we would seek him. And in seeking him, we would realize, oh, he was right around the corner. I thought he was distant and over there, but he was right around the corner because he was seeking me. Yeah. And so I just think the grace of this moment is tied to that. Is that, man, all of us are going to leave here with stories if God allows us in his kindness, and if, but that the stories that we tell will be ones that point to Jesus being with us in this moment, even when it's hard.
Yeah.
Like not hugging frequently is hard. But yeah, grace shows up in the hard stuff.
So I have can I try my hand at an illustration? You're 2 for 2.
I would hope so. I feel like I'm 1.5 for 2.
No, you're 2 for 2.
Praise me.
With all that, I wonder if vulnerability feels like getting socks for Christmas, but I wonder if vulnerability really, because in the end you're getting God. I wonder if it's more like giving a Ferrari to a toddler. So at Christmas time, a toddler would have, a baby likes the wrapping paper more than the present, but we don't understand. Did I get it? Did I get it? Was it good?
Yo, you're a pastor, man. What? That's so good.
If you're getting God and you're getting all the grace of this, we don't realize what vulnerability does in our lives for us to get. If we can get rid of all these things and stop and let him deal with the things he's wanting to deal with in our hearts, it's a gift beyond what we can imagine. We don't even know the full capacity of what it is that he's giving to us, that one day we'll drive around, and the rest of our lives, the things he can establish in our lives in this season, it's gonna pay off in our marriage and our friendships and our ministry and our work relationships and in our work production and in all of our life. If he can get down to some of these root issues, pride, self-reliance, all of these things, if he can get down to that, I mean, the payoff is in pretty much every category of life. Don't you think?
Bro, that's powerful. I agree, 1,000%. It's just hard, man. It's hard. Yeah. It makes me think of Ephesians 1, like Paul's prayer that we would have the eyes of our heart enlightened and strengthened, just so that we could know what God is doing. Everything he's doing is love. And to have our eyes strengthened and open to see what you just said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's our prayer for you. Our prayer is that as you're exploring what God might be doing in your heart through this season, that you would see that everything he's doing is through love for you, and that is an act of grace. So, hey, Muche.
Love you, man.
Thanks, man. Love you too, brother. Thank you for your word.
I'm going to mail you some mangoes.
Thank you. Before you leave that house. And mango season is upon us, Muche. I will remind you.
Before I got in the car to come here, I literally picked one up and I put it in the house, and I thought to myself, man, I should bring this to Robey.
Don't
but
say that.
I
Don't
feel
pretend like you
this
were
is-
going to do that.
I'm not even gonna lie. I'm
All right.
I'm pretty humble.
Up until this point, everything Muche's told you was true. This last
That was
segment-
true. Let me text Diamond so she vouched for me, yo.
Hey, thank you for joining this episode of the City Rev Life podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us on City Rev Life. You can subscribe to this podcast, rate and review wherever you're listening to this. And we love it when you share it with your friends on social media. For more videos and content, go ahead and check us out at cityrev.org/podcast or download our City Rev Church app. Have a great day.